Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Good Lord Bird. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, I love the opening, and it's just kind of like, oh, no, God will not let anyone, take a shot at us or whatever. And then lo and behold, Jeb walks up, and I love that kind of back and forth, because I love that one of his sons has a gun, and he slips and falls and slips in, mud right in front of, Onion and Bob. But nevertheless, it is a situation where he's warning him. It's like, hey, you got your sons back. You were supposed to turn yourself over to me, but you didn't. But he's like, the fact of the matter is, now if you turn yourself in, I will see that you get sent to a trial. But if you don't, there's a bounty on your head. It's like $3,000 plus someone else put up another $250. So it's like a lot of people. There's a lot of money on your head. Like, they want you dead or alive. But the dude they're talking to, was it Jeb? And I love that whole thing because, at one point you have John, messing with his horse or whatever. He's like, Mr. Brown, please cut that out. So it's just, still this moment of levity in between the seriousness. But even then, it's a situation of, do you serve the Lord, Jeb? And he's like, yeah, I do. And he's like, and the Lord believes everyone to be equal, right? So how can, do you look at yourself as you are above, and obviously end up bringing up, what was his, the new guy they got picked up from last episode I think it was Bronax. And it's like, do you think yourself better than him? It's like, for him, it's like, how can you believe in the Lord who believes in everyone being equal yet still support this system of slavery? So he's like, how much do I have? And it's like, you have $250. He's like, I'm offering $250 for someone else to bring him someone else's head or something like that. And Jeb's like, all right. Well, he's like, the fact of the matter is, I'm going to have to report to them that the moment I tell them that I had this encounter with you, they're going to basically send me out to hunt you. So I'm pretty sure the next time we meet, we'll be enemies. I will shoot you. I will shoot to kill you on sight. And I thought it was kind of interesting considering everything that he is so cordial in this manner. But he makes it clear when he's leaving. He's like, I get the feeling that the next time I meet, to the best of luck to all of you, because he's like, the next time I feel like I'm going to meet all of you, it's going to be over your dead bodies. And it's just this ominous thing of that wave just hit everybody. And it's it hit Henry, it hit everybody. They're trailing, and lo and behold, they find their way to George's house, which George died last episode. And so his wife falling to her knees, and it's still like that because they've lost people along the way, but this is that other side of it where you get to see this is his wife is just kind of no, for her the worst part was never knowing, and at least now she has an answer whether or not he was coming home, and she now knows he's not. And John is holding George's youngest and being like, I'm sorry, because he didn't tell him Beth. She's like, you can stay in the barn for a couple nights. Just watch out for the cow it kicks. You can see how devastated she is because no matter what the cause is, even if you believe in it, when it comes to losing someone you care about, you're always going to want them more than the cause. But it's this is what he believed in. This is what he was willing to fight for. I knew this was a possibility. You just hope it doesn't end up being this way. But John promising the youngest being you would be so proud of your dad. One day you will be proud of what your dad was accomplished. You won't, obviously you're a baby, so you don't recognize it, but when you're older, you'll understand. And obviously John having everyone sign a declaration that they are going to be a part of this fight, that basically the way things have kind of run now it's been going on for too long. He even says that he had a vision, God came to him and talked to him about a war, and it's okay, hinting to the Civil War. So it's interesting to know for John, it came to him as maybe just in his crazy mind, because he believes this war, there's going to be blood spilled on both sides, but for him it's the only way to make a difference in this situation, because for him it's what was he said it was actually I really like the wording of it, that he says it later on, but it feels the same conversation. I thought was kind of beautiful, that the fact of the matter is there is no such thing as friendship with someone who is all about slavery. It won't be until you beat them down and until they're apologetic for that, then we can talk about friendship. And I thought that was so interesting because obviously the Civil War being something that tore this country asunder, obviously it being a whole thing over slavery, but at the same time it's just which is a lot of, because like that's one of, I think it's considered, I could be mistaken, once again, my knowledge of history is not what it used to be, but I believe the Civil War is still considered like the bloodiest war in American history. I believe. I could be 100% mistaken. I mean, because I think it's also another thing too, because it's like not only was it a bloody war because it's just like, you know, it's like countrymen killing countrymen, I think always lead to like being the bloodiest war in any country's history, I think. But it might have just been told, like death toll wise, it probably just legitimately was literally the bloodiest war maybe. But regardless, you know, John talking about meeting the king of the Negroes, and it's just like, what? Like, even I was kind of like, I don't get that. But later on we find out who he was referencing. Said person was Frederick Douglass. Which obviously Henry being taken to the, well, for one, I love the train ride. I can't skip over that because I love the guy being like, oh, like, he's like, no, John's like, this is my daughter. You won't talk to her that way. It's like, whatever, she's still going to have to go. And he's like, you owe my daughter an apology. And he's not listening. And one guy pulls the dude who's taking the tickets aside. He's like, you do know who you're talking to, right? That's John Brown. And it's just like, so are you trying to get us all shot? Because the thing is, John goes by different names. And even Henry was like, yeah, he goes by whatever ones he can remember. The fact of the matter is, his reputation, like he's famous, like no matter how low key he wants to keep it, he's super famous at this point in time. So like everyone knows him because immediately people are like, that's fucking John Brown. He's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brown. No, the fake name, what was it? Nelson or whatever, like the fake name that they were using. Hawkins, I think, might have been the fake name they were using. Maybe. I can't remember. But regardless. But getting to the north, and you can see Henry's face because it's like, wait, there are black people running around who are well dressed, and it's just like they're treated like any other person. They be treated like white people. So for him, it's like, as someone in the South where like, because obviously that's the whole point. The North, I mean, granted, even with, obviously we know that even with that being what it is, there were still issues regardless. Like even with freedom in the North and, you know, everything, it still didn't, obviously South definitely had its issues, but I think the North still had its, even with like people of color being free. But I think from, you know, coming from what he's come from, being all that he's known, that world of the South, to being like, yeah, slavery, this is just how it is, to see it up north, to see things differently, to see, because even he was shocked because he saw like a mother and her daughter in a carriage, and he was just almost like, what the fuck? You know, and they, you know, they listened to John, and I love him being like, yeah, like the fact of the matter is he was beautiful. He's like talking about Frederick being beautiful, and he was like, I never knew I'd describe a gentleman like that, but he's like, it's just, he was so captivated by, you know, Frederick's words, and it's not just him. Obviously, every white person there was, you know, enveloped, you know, enraptured by his wording. And so when it was all said and done, they went over and met at Frederick's place. Obviously, you know, Frederick Douglass being played by Daveed Diggs, so that's pretty dope. Obviously, the most recent thing I've seen him in was the Snowpiercer TV show adaptation. But regardless, which is so interesting when you actually think about that. A revolutionary in Snowpiercer and now a revolutionary and abolitionist in this, you know, I think that's kind of interesting. Regardless, tangents and all that, but it was interesting when we met Frederick, because obviously Frederick's kind of like, oh, you should have let me know ahead of time. But obviously it's interesting, he has a staircase that's led, you know, slaves to freedom. It's basically a pathway to Canada. And so obviously we meet Mrs. Douglas, but we also was it Attilia, who is his other lady. And it's like, even John being like, they have their own rules, which I at first was like, wait, what? I was like, Frederick Douglass I was like, is she supposed to be here? Because it's like, this is his wife, Mrs. Douglas, and this is Ottilia. Like, he didn't describe her, so I was like, wait, is that supposed to be like his side? Like, it's just like, not a side piece thing. I think it's just kind of an equal arrangement of like, their, you know, what would be the word? I'm blanking on the word right now. I feel like such an idiot. Is polyamorous, is that the word I'm looking for? I'm probably butchering that. I feel like that's wrong, but it might be right. Regardless, it just him having more than one lady in his life. I thought that was interesting. It actually got me so fascinated. I was like, I know like a lot of this show is just kind of like fableized stuff, but I was still curious. I was like, I had to look it up because I was curious. It's like, no. But interestingly enough, it plays a little bit into some truth to reality, because his second wife was white though. And I was like, oh shit, I never knew that. He got remarried sometime after his first wife, Miss Douglas, ended up dying, and the lady because the lady in real life, because his wife's name is Anna, his second wife's name was Helen. So it's probably like a very fictionalized like other person. It's not. I don't think it's supposed to represent his actual second wife, but basically she was kind of all about the fight as well, like ending slavery, and I think because she lived on past. Frederick Douglass when he passed, and she continued his legacy, but regardless, like I said, this is the series doing its own thing, but I still thought it was so fascinating because it got me looking into it because you always curious about the facts about history, so I thought that was so fascinating. So obviously they're getting Onion all dressed up as a proper lady because he's like, oh, Mr. Fred, and she like, did you just refer to me? He's like, Mr. Fred. It's like, no, Mr. Douglas, and it's just because it's like because Frederick is I think he worked hard to gain some notoriety, and it's like I'm not going to have you just simply. It's like I'm a man of repute and stature, like kind of almost like basically show respect type of situation. But I love that Ottilia tries to like give her like a yellow dress, but then like Anna comes over and it's like no. You look better in red. It doesn't, it's just kind of like, so it's kind of like that whole thing of like, oh, the two wives kind of going at it. I just thought that was so interesting. And obviously, like, the back and forth, like the dinner scene was so interesting. Oh my God, I didn't talk about it, even though I meant to talk about it. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. I want to circle back because there was a whole, the thing about the train. I literally got sidetracked and forgot to talk about what we learned on the train because it's like, it's like he's sending his wife some money and then Henry's like, oh, like your wife, like, oh, you got a farm and everything? He's like, yeah, it's a little bit in this direction. It's like, wait, you got a farm and everything that you own? It's like, you're rich? And he's like, oh, am I rich? He's like, he's basically saying he's rich in grief because his current wife isn't his first wife. He had to bury his first wife after having already buried 9 children. For him, it was a situation of he's rich in grief. It's like after that came, money issues and shame and everything. So it's like, if I'm rich in anything, it's grief. And to hear that, maybe that makes him even more like grateful for why he's fighting because as someone who's lost so much and lost everything, he can't he can't be empathetic, but maybe he can be sympathetic to like, someone losing all, so it's like, I was gifted so much and sadly I lost so much, but these are people who deserve to be free, I think maybe he looked at all, because some people of faith believe, any terrible shit that's happened in your life, it's, God only gives you what he believes you can handle. So maybe, John looks at it as that, maybe this was a test and this continues to be a test that God's leading me down the path that I'm supposed to go. Like that was all steps necessary for, however heartbreaking it is for me to be on the path I am now. And and Henry saying like, it reminded me of Job. And then he was like, wait, Job? You've been reading, and it's like, yeah, I'm so proud of you. And I thought that was kind of a sweet moment. But circling back to it, at the dinner table, like John is like he wants to get funding from 6, and he needs Frederick to speak on his behalf to get funding for this operation. Because obviously he doesn't want to go. He's like, oh, all will be revealed soon enough. But like the moment I get the funding, then I'll tell you what's up. But Frederick is because obviously like, and it's so interesting too because like you have Frederick in the center and he's kind of torn between these two worlds because Ottilia kind of doesn't want him to go down the path of someone that she believes is crazy and radical like John, but his wife Anna is all about it because it's like, this is a man that's willing to fight, go to war, spill blood if it means saving us and freeing our people. Like, how can there be anything wrong with that? And Frederick is kind of caught in the middle. Like there are two physical representations of like the tug and pull of which direction he's kind of leaning on, whether this is the right thing to do or whether it's not. And I thought that was such a fascinating thing. Once again, I love that he's about to do his whole prayer beforehand, and he's like, oh, this reminds me of something. It's like John, and it's like they're asking Onion to be the one to lead the whole thing, and Henry can't think of what to say, and Attilia's like, just say anything. He says something, amen, boom, all right, let's get to eating. I love it. I love that being this recurring gag about John. But I thought it was interesting because John was talking about it from the perspective of, any slave would want to fight for their freedom, even if, it meant dying. Like, any slave would jump at the hand. But Frederick was like, do not speak, do not presume to know what it's like to, as someone who's never been in that situation, don't you talk like you've been in the position of a slave, to presume to know, he's like, as a man who has been, one of his wives had been like, don't do that. And John's like, I'm sorry. But as someone, he talks about, his dad sheltering someone who was I think a runaway, and it was a friend named Daniel. He was the same ages, and they were both 9. And he was like, some men showed up, beat Daniel into the head with a shovel until he was dead, And for him, he's like, in that moment, I looked and saw the evil in those men's eyes. And I think moments like that are probably what led John to where he is now. And Frederick, hearing that story, I think it made him go like, okay, I can understand why you're so belief in this. But Attilia's still like, you're crazy. And he's like, yes. And he said what I had said earlier. And like I said, it was so powerful. Because it's just like, yeah, you might call me a fool, but I'm a fool, underneath the Lord's eyes. Like, the Lord is guiding me down this path, so I'll be a fool for the Lord going down this path, because he feels like there is no other way, because even in Frederick's like, it's generations from now before, because obviously he's worried that like, if you go down this path of war, it's just going to complicate, it's going to mess up any goodwill that could go towards ending this without going down the bloodshed route. But obviously, once again, he's torn because his wife is all about, no, we need to go down the bloodshed route. Blood needs to be spilled. But Attilia, it's like, no, don't do this. Which I love that, like, Henry's trying to sneaks. I love that thing where it's just like Henry's got the drinks and everything. And then Frederick's like, I put him down right here. And then John's like, no, not right now, Onion. And just the back and forth. And Onion, Henry's like, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing these damn drinks? And they both just take the drinks and just leave. But him sneaking some alcohol, and then Frederick coming in like, Henrietta, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I poured you a tray. It's like, oh, I need to calm my nerves. He's like, all right, you can have a sip or two. And Henry's just all about it. But then like Attilia comes in there, she's making moves on him, and he was like hysterical. And she's like, go ahead, call me hysterical. He's like, you're wrong, you're right. And she's like, just promise me, you won't get killed because of John. And it started getting all freaky. She's whispering some sexy shit in his ear. He's like, oh, you little, and then realizes that Onion's still there, and they stop that. But obviously, it's also the thing of like, well, how many men? Because it's like, Henry talks a little bit about herself in the sense of like, oh, like, my dad, because obviously, like, Frederick was like, the Negro doesn't know where they came from, doesn't know their mother's name, their father, and he's like, oh, I know my pa. I mean, he's dead, kind of because of the old man Brown, but it's like, he is crazy, and it's like, I don't know if I'd go as far as calling him crazy, but it's like, how many men does he have? 10. 10, he's like, yeah, some have come, some have gone, but he's like, 10, that's not even a dozen, because now it makes him think like, at the very least, I guess in his mind, it's like, if John had a full-blown army behind him, that'd be one thing, but only less than a dozen men, and obviously, like I said, some have died, some have gone, some have come, some have went, so when it's all said and done, though, they're drinking more. Like I said, Miss Douglas comes in telling him that he should do this. What I thought was interesting, too, is that Henry's talking from the, obviously from the perspective of the future, being like, if I knew what was coming, I would have popped Frederick then because he was going to sell John short just when he needs his help the most. So I'm curious to see, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, what that necessarily entails. I'm assuming maybe that's where John ended up getting captured, or maybe it's a point before then, whatever the case may be. So like I said, Attilia's telling him not to side with John, to be a little more harsher towards John, but then you have his wife being like, join John, like, a war is necessary to kind of cleanse, fix this situation to make things better. And obviously, like, the whole thing, all the hot and steamy stuff is making Henry want to drink more, because it's like, whoa, this is crazy. And it's like, it's reminding him of his first love, Pie. And it's like, Pie, that's an interesting name for a guy. But regardless, they're drinking, and it's like, oh, let's drink one for, all the slave people that can't be here right now to hear your speech. Oh, yeah, let's hear it for all the enslaved animals, the cats, the dogs, and the goats. Oh, yeah, all the goats. And just, so that was interesting. But even when that all being said and done, regardless of all that he's been through, Onion, Henry still tries to run, and the other guy there stops Henry because he sees through Henry. It's like, oh, you're dressed like a girl, but it's like, the fact of the matter is, what are you going to do? And he's like, I'm going to run, because like only a fool would stay, like go back to fight. Like, having seen the North now, only a fool would actually go back and fight, because fighting just leads to death. And he's like, I'm no fool. But this dude said he came from South Carolina. He isn't kin to Frederick. He was a slave, and he kind of had to make the journey on his own because it was too risky to bring anyone else. So that means any family or friends, he had to leave them behind. So that's obviously got to be a heavy burden to shoulder on its own right. It's like everyone potentially care about and love, you had to leave behind just to ensure your own freedom. And that guilt has to eat you away at some point in some shape or form. But it's like, how do you know when you're ready to run? He was like, I didn't. It's just like, I decided, I would, if I was going to if death was going to come for me, I'd rather face it as a free man. And I think that changed Onion's opinion. And Henry coming back and seeing John passed out, it inspired Onion just to stay. Like, because I think it's just like, obviously with everything going down, because John can be crazy, especially him talking about a war, there's going to be so much bloodshed and death, because even Frederick is reluctant about it. But the dude was like, even if Mr. Frederick isn't willing to always kind of go, even though him and John may have differences opinions about everything, he still supports like the fight to free, black people. I just thought that was an insightful, situation. But even then, like, obviously John wakes up and Onion's still there, and Onion, as they're leaving, Onion's still looking at him. And I think it's just an acknowledgement of like, what are you willing to fight and what are you willing to die for, So, like I said, a lot of interesting things. I'm curious to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.